So,
Brandy, it's
Jason, how's
so
it
good to see
going?
you.
Yeah,
It
good
is
to meet
going excellently. Work has been crazy. I've added 3 headcount to my team, so I'm uh, trying to onboard them and get them up to speed and figuring out what they do so they can take stuff off of my plate. But at the
you. Yeah.
same time, I'm trying to grow into a manager role that I haven't filled for probably 20 years,
Okay.
which actually kind of ties into why I hang out on Human Amplified, because
Ooh.
it's all kind of personal growth mindset type stuff, right? So
Yeah.
it's I've been knee deep in it for probably about 6 months now, and trying to get up to speed and figure out how to work better with people. But
Yeah. Ooh. Okay.
yeah.
Well, now I just want to ask you so many questions. Like, how do you, one, are you liking it? And two, uh, what are you focusing on to work better with people? Like, what are the specifics?
Not a lot of specifics. I've been looking at a bunch of content online, books, blogs, stuff like that, management courses, but also so many other things going on in my world that it all kind of bleeds together. Um, it's really just been about paying attention to content that comes across my plate, whether it be on Facebook or Instagram, something like that. Every now and again, some little tidbit of something pops out on Twitter, maybe,
Yeah.
and go, oh, I got to file that away. Pay attention to that and let it mull around in the brain for a while, and kind of sit with it to see if it makes sense, or if I can, adopt that perspective or method or whatever. Gone
Yeah.
through some management training,
Okay.
but man, I hate management training. It is
Is it
just awful. Workshops like that, I mean, they're dull. You sit
dry?
down, you get presented to, then you split off into small groups, and you have to role
Yes.
play or something. It's awful. Like,
Yeah.
I don't appreciate that style of learning as much as just hands-on getting in and doing it, that kind of work.
Yeah.
But
Well, awesome. Okay. Well then, so if you like to be more hands-on and all that, like what made you decide to go into management?
the money.
Ah,
It
yeah.
in my career, it's really, I was kind of getting to the point where, in order to progress any further, I had to pull a management role. It was just a must do kind of thing in
Yeah.
order to get the better paycheck, to to grow into higher ranking roles, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
You're just stuck becoming a manager, period.
Gotcha.
So I
That
um
that makes
I
sense.
accepted a really good offer from my company that made me happy. I get to run a program. Uh, I get to own it. It's my thing, and one of the things that came with it were headcount. And I sat back and did some soul searching, because for the past 20-25 years, I've not wanted to be a manager. I've actively avoided it and actively stayed as an individual contributor
Yeah.
because of my early experiences managing people. So
Okay.
I
Okay.
finally, I kind of stepped back and figured out that I needed to get over myself and try it again. Enough time's gone by, enough personal growth has occurred that, maybe it won't be so bad this time.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's really interesting. Gosh, because I know like you and are in similar careers, and like especially before I switched over, like I was
Right.
doing technical writing and content management and all that stuff. And like I too actively stayed away from management. Like
Right.
anytime there was a talk about it, I was like, I would just like to expand, horizontally in my role. No, no people management. And then it was like it would always go back to that, and I would push back and was like, nah. But I would like,
Right.
yeah, at some point, like it's going to need to happen, I suppose, because if we keep growing here.
Exactly. As a small business owner,
Exactly.
you in order to get to where you want to be, those next steps, you need to suck it up and start that management process at some point, because you cannot do everything yourself.
Yes. And
It's just
we're
not
like
possible.
at the point where I feel like we're at a tipping point where if something, I don't know, it's like we're growing and we're growing and I'm adding stuff and I'm adding stuff. And it's like soon we will be there. I hope within the next year, I will have
Right.
somebody to help me push some of this stuff out and do it, but it's still really fun. So
Yeah. It has to be fun to do it, right?
yeah.
It there are those pieces that you might not like quite as much, but
Yeah.
from my perspective, it's knowing when to grow and how to grow it's a key piece for small businesses, but
Yeah.
it's also one of the most difficult things to actually see when you're knee deep in it.
Yeah. I was going to ask you, with your content career and stuff like that, have you ever done anything like, have you owned a podcast or done stuff like that?
Not from the content space.
Okay.
I've owned a program that's about as much ownership as I can have in the content space, as much as I want. I get to kind of direct strategy and whatnot, but um, I did own a distillery for 5 years with my partner. He and I co-owned the distillery. He took the brewing side of the process, and I finished it off in the distillation side of the process. And he balanced out my faults and failures, and I balanced out his. He's very much a logical, rational numbers guy. He
Yeah.
does a lot of great accounting work, understands economics, things like that. So he took all of the numbers, compliance, uh, billing, all of that, and ran with it. And I took more of the sales, marketing side to the house. So we really balanced each other well on that side, but
That's
we
awesome.
never got to that tipping point where we were able to grow the way we knew we needed to. So
Yeah.
it was it was tough, but um, you know, wearing all the hats, I understand that you cannot do everything, and there was a point where we could see if we were going to grow, we'd have to do it in a way that was smart, efficient, and timely. And
Yeah.
it's tough because you want to grow to expand your revenue, right?
Mhm.
But you kind of feel at times that you need that revenue to support the growth, right?
Yes.
It's a really difficult spot to be in, and
Yeah.
sometimes it just comes down to making that initial investment in a person or a tool or something that you need. You might be stretching to get it, but investing up front can have its payoff down the line. It's a risk, right?
Yeah.
Especially for small businesses. And
Yeah.
it's a risk that my partner and we weren't willing to take. We
Okay.
often talked about investment opportunities for people and helping us grow in that respect. But when it came down to it, we weren't comfortable with risk. And when we closed the business, we closed it with zero corporate debt. So there was,
Good. I
yeah,
guess. I mean,
yeah, we were effectively in a self-sustaining position. So the
uh-huh.
business was running itself. Um, we weren't taking salaries at the time, but everything else, it was paying for itself.
Yeah.
Um, Beyond that, we were able to walk away free and clear, which was nice. We made our money back on our investments, and closed the doors and moved on, which was uh, not something that I think a lot of small businesses have the capability to do. So I considered it a win. Um,
Yeah, for sure.
Sad, but a win nonetheless.
Yeah. Well, I
At the
don't
same
know.
time, there are ways that we could have grown and possibly should have if we had really sat back and did some strategic planning to look at things to understand where our trigger points were and
Mm,
what we'd have to do to get there. And that, I think, like in your situation, might help figure out what you need to do when you need to do it, and make it a little easier to digest and come to terms with the fact that you might have to take out a small loan to support that growth.
Yeah. Gosh, I hate the thought of that.
Right?
But yes, I know. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
The old adage, you got to have money to make money.
Yep.
Sometimes it's you have to make that little stretch and do the investment to support that growth, and support it knowing and believing in what you're doing, and that it will reap the benefits down the line.
Yeah. This is really interesting that this is coming up, because I feel like money and like people's relationship to money and their mindset around money and their fears and their hopes, all of this has just been coming up like everywhere lately, at least in my life. I don't know about you, but yeah, it's just like in the collective or something right now.
It has a little bit. I've definitely been watching my portfolios go down and
That
up a
might,
little today, but you know, um, the market correction is going on, and it's been I think on people's minds, even if they're not focused on it.
yeah,
It's something that's sitting there in the back that we all know. You log into your 401k account, you can see the damage that's going on, and the market
that's
will correct
true.
itself, I'm sure. But I think that has a kind of underlying thread of I don't even want to say concern, but just awareness, even if it's not conscious.
Yeah, that makes sense. I hadn't even like put two and two together, even though I've been following some of that stuff too. Like, what do you think? Do you think Facebook's going to go away?
I haven't been following that. No,
Oh, okay. Cause like I
I
guess
haven't.
I haven't like looked into it too much, but the other day I saw something where like they were going to shut it down in Europe, and then Stephanie, she was like, everybody back up your Facebook, and I was like, wait, why? What's happening?
I haven't been following that at all. I've reduced my use of Facebook pretty substantially, and
Mm.
um, just the past few weeks, my time focused on work has been excessive. So while it's open and on my other computer, I can glance at it and go, oh yeah, there's Facebook. I haven't refreshed it in like 4 or 5 hours.
Yeah.
Haven't actually scrolled or looked at what's going on. Haven't checked the news even.
Yeah. Well, oh my
Yeah,
gosh.
I don't know. I don't think it's going away, but it
Yeah.
might shift and adjust and change to something slightly different.
It would be such a weird world without it, I think now. I don't even know, but
Yep.
anyways, it's really
Yeah.
good to see your face. I'm so glad you joined this call. Like,
Well, thank you. You as well. It's always great to chat with you.
yeah. Gosh, what have you, I don't know. Do you want to ask me any questions about the podcast or anything? Or do you just want to like shoot the shit? Or what do you want to do?
I didn't come in with any preformed questions, but I definitely had. I always have stuff kind of rattling around in the back. I was curious how you're managing your Discord server, and how that is going for you. I know it's kind of brand new, and probably a challenge for figuring out the space and how it's working and all that.
It is. And so, well, we talked a little bit about it through email. And after we talked, I went and spent some time on the rules and looked around and figured out
I
all
saw
the
that.
features, because I was I'm super new to Discord. And um, I started inviting people. So I invited two guests, because it would be really cool if the guests were available for anybody on Discord to ask questions or just like talk about
Right.
life and support each other. And I got as far as I could, and then I was like, this is not efficient enough. I need to figure out a better way to contact people. And then that sort of stalled out, and
Yep.
I got really sick.
Well,
And then, yeah, so then I had to rush to keep the episodes moving, and that sort of took a backseat. So,
of course.
yes. But yeah, I had been really like dizzy for a while and sick to my stomach
Mm.
for months and could not figure out what it was. And I just recently found out that I have food sensitivities
Oh,
and I'm
wow.
like highly allergic to almonds and peanuts. And I was eating those things.
Oh, dear. Well, glad you got it figured out. You look like you're doing wonderfully well. So,
I feel so much better. Well, I mean, I just stopped eating all that stuff that I mean, and it's a laundry list of food that is like triggering me. And but I stopped eating it and I feel like 10 times better.
interesting. It's amazing how, some of the most innocuous things that we put in our bodies can trigger such challenging bodily behavior, I guess,
Yeah.
which, and talking about Facebook, it kind of connects into not only what we put in our bodies, but what we put in our minds as well, right? Like there's so many things that I think we're allergic to that just hits us on our streams all day, and we're not even cognizant of it, right?
Yeah.
Like peanuts, some people love them, some people hate them, but they're not
Mhm.
allergic. Other people, like you apparently, have really bad reactions to them, and I think the same can be said for our social feeds at times,
Yeah,
which is
that
one of the reasons why I've kind of just not bothered with some stuff.
like need a detox from it to
Yeah,
like not be inflamed and
right.
like all the stuff that it causes. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense.
Kind
So
of that holistic perspective, I guess.
yeah. Well, not an excuse to say that, that like the Discord server is definitely on my mind and I want to make it work. So this is the first time that I've ever built a community like that. And I think there's going to be big learning curves.
Indeed, community management is it's not easy. Like building a podcast, right? There's a lot of things that you discovered along the way that you probably hadn't thought about at all, had no idea it was part of that thing, and you
Exactly.
realize how deep it goes. Communities are kind of similar. It's
Yeah.
speaking about growth, right? A community manager could be one of your first hires, just someone to help work and manage that community, not only in moderation, but just in care and feeding of it, right? It's communities are living things that need support, and community managers are worth their weight in gold at times.
Yes. Oh,
Yeah. Spam number.
oh, okay. Okay.
I'm one of those odd people nowadays who actually still has a landline, and
That's
I
awesome.
don't
Yeah,
know
we don't.
I don't know how they get the number, but they do.
Oh, they still, I mean, like, do you get spam on your cell phone now too?
I do.
Yeah. Yeah, that's like,
Texts and calls.
oh, the texts are insane. They're like nonstop, but
Yeah.
anyways.
Yeah.
Well, um, speaking of, well, I was going to say growing a community and the parallels to growing a podcast. One of the things that I was going to talk about is why a podcast. And there was a connection there, but I don't know. I'm just so excited to hang out. I totally forgot the connection, but I'll think of it. But
I'm sure you will.
yeah, but I can go. Well, I don't want to bore you with a presentation. So I do have some stuff prepared just based on like frequently asked questions that I normally get.
Awesome. I
Um,
I'll tell you what, I'm getting pinged on work, which is my life now apparently. Um,
yes.
I will let you take over control and talk through your presentation and answer questions. I will jump off, and I will love to watch that replay now and hear all the amazing information that you have to put forth.
Yay. Well, thank you so much. It was so good to see you and hope to
Brandy,
see you
it's
again soon.
wonderful to see you as well.
Yeah.
Cheers.
Cheers. All right. Well, you guys, That was Jason. He is one of the patrons in the Patreon community. And as you heard, you can interact with him in the Discord community. And I don't know enough about Discord yet to answer a ton of questions about it. And I'm sorry about that. But really, it's just a place to hang out, and this year for Human Amplified, it's all about healthy growth. That is the theme for the year. Last year, it was all about bold authenticity. And this year, I'm taking that bold authenticity and putting it behind the healthy growth and seeing where I can find efficiencies to just keep growing. And speaking of growing, that the podcast has been growing for like four years now. We're in season 4 and we've hit some crazy milestones that I'm just so grateful for. And so I want to share with you how to do that too, if you're interested. So let's just, I know we're already into the time here, but just in case you're new here, I want you to know that I'm Brandy Fleck. I'm a storyteller and the founder of Human Amplified. I'm a writer, an artist, a communications expert, and host of the top-rated Human Amplified podcast that has been around since 2018, like I just said. So in the first call we had in January of 2022, we went over some expectations about what this monthly time can be used for. So if you haven't watched that video, feel free to go back and check it out or ping me on Patreon if you have any questions about hanging out during live Q&A. But really, this can just be a fun time to hang out. You can ask me anything. If I don't have anything prepared, that doesn't mean I won't have an answer for you, but I might have to think about it. It takes me, I like to process things and be very intentional about what I say. So sometimes it takes me a minute, but this time can be for whatever, like you just saw with Jason on here, which is always such a pleasure. So other than that, in the first call, we talked a lot about the most important things you need to think about when starting a podcast as a beginner. So this month, what I do have prepared is that we will keep going with the podcasting 101 theme by answering more frequently asked questions that I typically get about podcasting. So if you have questions and you're watching this replay, just feel free to post them in the comments for this video in the Patreon feed. And remember, this video is for your eyes only. So, okay. Without further ado, let's dive in. I've got some questions written here, so I'm pulling up my notes. So out of the questions I get asked the most, the ones that we will focus on today are why a podcast, like you heard me say earlier, over some other form of media, like a blog or something like that. And my answer might actually surprise you. What equipment and software do you use? Where do you record? Should a podcast be a business? And if so, what business services do you use? So it's really interesting that Jason was bringing up small business and the business aspects of things, because we're going to get into a little bit of that today. And if you are just one person doing a podcast or something like that, you really need to become as efficient as possible, be able to automate as much as possible, especially if you don't have the resources to immediately hire someone, which is the situation we're in right now. But, it's a process. Like the journey that I took with Human Amplified was basically starting this as a side project while I was working a full-time job in content and technical writing and sales and marketing and graphic design, all of those skills, which transferred so nicely over to this. But that's not to say you have to have those skills to do this. There are ways to get the things you need, and we will talk about some of that. But it evolved from a side project to eventually I was able to go full-time. It is becoming self-sustaining, we will say that. So like where Jason was in the distillery, I'm not giving myself a salary right now. Every bit of support that you put into this podcast really truly goes into keeping it running. And the more patrons we get, the more you guys use affiliate links that I put out there, the more you guys sponsor episodes, it just keeps it running that much longer. So the cool thing is that I wasn't planning on telling you, but we did have 400% subscriber growth from season 2 to season 3. So I expect to really keep that going in season 4. And because the guests are still coming and we already have a wait list for season 5, there's no reason to think that it won't keep going, but your support does help that happen. So I'm hopeful. Okay. So why a podcast as opposed to some other media? I get this question a lot. And the reason that I chose a podcast is, and this is probably not how you're supposed to do things in business, but it was based on feeling. It was based on thinking that a podcast would be fun, that it was a way to interview people and involve people in a more personal way and humanize people through voice and through interaction, as opposed to like interviewing someone and writing a story for a blog or just writing a blog myself. When I first came up with the concept of Human Amplified, which was on Being Human at the time when I came up with it, I expected it to be a lifestyle blog. I expected it to be indie media like it is now, but I expected it to have recipes, gardening tips, music reviews, book reviews, all of these things, which would be amazing to eventually add into Human Amplified once we have more people working at Human Amplified, but all in due time, right? And knowing when the timing is right, like Jason said, is so important. So that has been something I have learned over the course of doing this, is if the timing's not right, you can just stop what you're doing, correct course, pivot, do something different. And maybe the timing for that will be right at another time. Like, for example, last year, I wrote an online course about breaking negative cycles and overcoming your past so that you can have peace in your present and all of this. I put out we had a team of beta test volunteers, which I know that one of you on this Patreon were one of the beta testers, which was so cool. And the timing just wasn't right. I wasn't able to keep the course coming for testing at the same time as I was putting out content for the blog, the podcast, rebranding, and all of those things. And sometimes those are really hard lessons. But the good news is you can always correct course. And when the timing is right, go with it. So I still have that course in the works, for example, and I was just thinking about the timing of it today. I was thinking, I really want to launch it in the spring, but I'm looking realistically at my calendar, at all of the things we have coming up that you have to juggle when you're running a business. And I don't know if it's going to come out in the spring. And I'm like, well, maybe it can come out in the summer, but timing. And besides money, timing has been a big thing that I have been grappling with and thinking about lately. So all that to say, if you start a podcast based on feeling like I did, and then you find out that it's too much work or it doesn't bring you as much joy that you thought it would, you can course correct. You can do something different. There is nothing in the world that makes you have to stick with it if you don't want to stick with it. But if you do, and you're committed to it, and you want to keep doing it because you like it and you think there's a benefit to it, and the pros outweigh the cons, then absolutely keep doing it. So to sum up, there were several reasons, but mostly I thought that being able to humanize other people would be easier through a podcast than a blog. Now, we did build out the blog a year after we launched the podcast, which was really important to do. And I really wanted to do that. And they both have different amounts of work. When I first started podcasting, I thought that the podcast would be easier than the blog. So if you've had experience writing, you might think that too, but I just want to tell you that it's not. It's just as much work as running a blog. It's just different type of work. And if you're not used to it, it has a learning curve, which also creates more work, right? So those are just things to think about when you're starting a podcast. But the human interaction is very nice. And getting to produce an episode and play with the music gives you a creative outlet. Like if you're putting music into it, if you're doing artwork for it, it gives you a creative outlet that you don't really get in other ways. So it's a fun little niche and area to be in. I hope that helps. Based on feeling isn't always the answer you want to hear. But if you would like to make a decision on whether or not to do a podcast, and you are more of the analytical type and you want to think strategically, there is a website I want to tell you about that I will go list in the Backstage Pass content library when I post this video. It's called PodTrack. You can sign up for their newsletter and they will send you podcast data with information on things like who are the top podcast publishers, how many people in the general population are listening to podcasts right now. So you can see when the best times or when the most listens occur during the year and in what genres and things like that. And then you can compare that information to other research that you've done on like blogs, or maybe you have a blog and you know what your traffic is like and what the patterns are. Maybe you want to make a choice to start a podcast. You can look at that PodTrack data. Okay, so I'll give you that link. And that's where I would recommend to start if you want to make a more logical decision or analytical decision. Okay. One other question that I get is, where do you record? And if you are starting a podcast, you do not have to have a professional recording studio, but you can. You honestly, you can start in your closet. And I recorded the majority of season 1, all of season 2 in my closet, full of clothes. That's the important part. Your clothes have to be in there, but we weren't recording video at the time. So if you're not doing video, of course, this is no big deal. If you are, you might want to have a little different background or something like that. And we'll talk about that in a second. But your closet is so cool to record in. It's some of the best sound that I've ever been able to get while recording at home, because the clothes dampen the echo. And I've mentioned this before, but it's very important to not let the echo bounce off the walls. So the closet is just so good for that. And it's so funny. A lot more people do that than you think. I did decide to come out of the closet in that regard back then, because it was like I needed to start recording video. I have these sound panels behind me. I think you can see here. Let me move my notes real quick. Yeah, you can see those sound panels behind me, but what happens is when I'm in this office that I'm in now, these sound panels still aren't enough. So I've got 3 big ones all behind me. You can't see the third one, which is over there. But I'm also really sensitive to aesthetics. So I did not want eggshell foam and all of that things to cover all of my walls. I don't want, I wouldn't mind. You can put rugs on the floor if you have a hardwood floor. You can put lots of rugs. You can hang curtains. You can, I know a friend who podcasts who hangs quilts all over her walls, and that really produces good sound. But aesthetics are just so important to me, and I want to be able to hang art. So I do sacrifice a little bit of that. But that's where this foam comes in. That's where this comes in. And if you'll notice, I have a different mic now on a different stand because the mic finally broke last week. And I don't know if we'll have time to talk about equipment, but I'll tell you about that. So this is the Chaotica eyeball, and this helps dampen the sound. I'm not going to go too much into that now because I think we talked about that last time. To sum up, you can record in your closet. You can record in a home studio with sound panels of different types. There are foam, this is wood and cotton batting with a linen covering. Curtains, quilts, rugs, those types of things can make your space sound better. You can also go mobile. I haven't gone mobile, so I don't know about all that equipment yet, but that is a goal for the future. So we'll talk about that another day. Also, if you want to have in-person guests, and you don't want strangers coming to your house, you can rent shared workspace. And there are also decked out podcast studios that have the equipment, that have the sound panels already built out that you can rent from to do those interviews. It just depends. If you're just starting out, you might not want to do that, right? Like I would not have the funds to do that when I first started, and there's still no need for Human Amplified to do that today, but I know that people do that. So that's an option. Excuse me. Like I was saying earlier, these allergies, I'm still working on them, and I've had doctors tell me so many different things, and some people thought it was COVID related, but now they're thinking it's all just allergy related. So excuse me if I cough or sneeze or something like that, but everything's okay. The next question is, what equipment do you use? Let me scroll down and just tell you what I started with. So if you want to start a podcast, you don't need very much. So say you have a limited budget, it's just going to be a hobby. You need a mic, a pop filter, headphones, a computer, and that's about it. That's what we started with. We started with those things. And now I have upgraded a little bit, but we still haven't ventured out very much. So I use a MacBook Pro. I started out with a Blue Yeti mic, but switched 2 weeks ago to a Nady gold diaphragm, condenser mic. And that is because my husband had this mic. And when my mic busted, I did a lot of research, and some of the best mics that were out there were for broadcasting were dynamic mics. So if you are looking for a mic, it is important to decide if you want a condenser mic or a dynamic mic. Those are the two main types you can choose from. I use condenser mics this entire time. And what that means is basically, without going into too much technical detail, I will tell you that condenser mics sound crisper and brighter. They also pick up a lot more background noise. They are sensitive. There are settings that you can adjust to correct for that, and you can edit for that. But it is hard to get out some background noise if you're talking when it happens. So with a dynamic mic, it can handle loud noises better without causing distortion. So that's a pro, but it's not as bright and crisp. So to me, with the dynamic mics that I've tried, it sounds a little muffled to me, and it sounds a little darker, if that makes sense. Like, I don't know how to describe it other than darker, but it's not as bright and crisp, and it's almost a little deeper, maybe, if that helps. And so that can still sound good. That can sound very good. And if you don't have a lot of time to edit, you might not want your mic to be as sensitive and pick up the background noise, but I personally like the clean, crisp sound of a condenser mic. Now, I started with the Blue Yeti, which is a very affordable, good mic. By affordable, it's about $200. But if you go lower than that, you might not get great quality. However, the Blue Yeti mic, what's so easy about it for beginners is that it has a USB that you plug straight into your computer and then it just works. You have the settings right there on the mic and you can talk into it. But with that comes like this electrical high-pitched buzzing sound sometimes that Blue Yeti mics are notorious for. So if that's going to drive you crazy, and if that's going to drive your listeners crazy, maybe don't go there. And you can try this condenser mic that is the Nady Gold diaphragm condenser mic. We've got it in a musician mic stand, but you can buy a mic boom for it, which is just a metal arm that connects to your desk and holds your microphone where you need it. But like right now, I just move this back and forth now. And I actually like it a lot better than the Blue Yeti, which is what I showed you last month. So, but the Blue Yeti was very usable and easy to use for the first several years of this podcast. So it is a good entry mic. Who knows? By the next time we have a call, we might have another mic to talk about. I upgraded my pop filter. Oh, I had another pop filter I wanted to show you that is a lot smaller and I didn't grab it. Here's a little tip. If you don't want to buy a pop filter to begin with and you just want to stick to bare minimum, you can take a wire hanger and some wire cutters and make a circle with the hanger or something like that. Put pantyhose over it and hold that in front of your mic or attach it to your mic, and that will keep the p and the s and the mouth noises to a minimum. It sort of like keeps the wind from hitting the microphone directly. They're also called wind screens. So that's something you can do on a budget. I still have the same headphones I started with. They are Tascam. They do plug in to your mic or directly into your computer, and they get the job done, but it's good to have headphones when you're in an interview or when you're editing because you can hear really the details. I now have an external hard drive to back up the interviews and the show files, and that's very important. You do not want to lose those files. You always want to have them backed up. We talked about the sound panels. I also have a ring light now because we do video. If you're doing video, you want to pay attention to lighting. And I have a little live sign on the front of my desk that's like a neon sign, and it lets everyone in the house know when I'm recording. Of course, they know I'm on a call right now and I'm not recording, so they're making all kinds of noise out there. It's dinner time, whatever, but that's come in really handy and is fun, but not required at all. So I will post this equipment list in the Backstage Pass content library too for you to look at, just in case you want to get started. You've got your bare minimum, and then I'll have some other stuff in the list that we just talked about that you could upgrade to if you wanted to. I also have a more in-depth resource that tells you the pros and cons in more depth of condenser mic versus a dynamic mic, in case you want to get a microphone and know exactly how it will affect your vocals. Okay, so that'll be great. That'll be there too. And this is a good segue into, I get asked a lot, what software do I use and what should people use if they want to start a podcast? So I'll just tell you what I started with, which was very minimal and is totally doable. I started with Skype, GarageBand, Squarespace, G Suite, and Adobe Creative Cloud. And you probably don't even have to start with all of those. You don't have to have G Suite. You can use Gmail and just have an email for your podcast if you even want one. You don't have to use Adobe Creative Cloud. You can use a free program like Canva to do your artwork if you need to. But so Skype was how we recorded. GarageBand was how Skype was how we recorded interviews. GarageBand is how I started out editing the interviews, but it's also how you produce an episode. So GarageBand is the audio editing software where you will put in the music files, the intro, the actual interview, and all the different parts and pieces of your episode that come from different audio files. That's where it all comes together. That is where you can adjust settings, sound. There are things that you work with called levels. There's a compressor which gets rid of distortion and helps smooth out your sound, because if you've ever seen audio files and when you're talking, you see the waves that go up and down. If someone gets really loud or your mic is really sensitive, those can bust out the top of the track or the levels, and the levels are like the top and bottom of the sound. So I didn't know anything about GarageBand when I started, but it came free on a Mac. It still comes free on a Mac. I still use it to this day. If you don't have a Mac, I know that there's a software out there called Audacity that a lot of people like. And there is a software that my husband Ryan uses called Reaper. And he pays for that. You do have to pay for that, but it's a very cheap license. I think only like $60, or it was back last time I checked. So in a nutshell, you only need something to record your interviews with, something to produce your episodes and edit your episodes in, and then you need somewhere to host. So we talked about this a little bit last time, but I use Squarespace. You really, really need a website because, like we were talking about earlier, we don't know what's going to happen with Facebook. We don't know the adjustments that are going to happen. We don't know that if it's going to go away. We don't know, if the stock keeps plummeting, what's going to happen with Facebook. We don't know. You don't just want your episodes there. Okay. You want a hosted website. Even if you can't design one, they have tons of websites out there with templates that you can just sort of start out with. And then over time, you can tweak it and make it better and better and better as your podcast grows. So everything doesn't have to be perfect to launch, but you do need a place to house it. And I chose Squarespace because it's sort of a one-stop shop, and I like having all my things in one place. So when I say that I use G Suite to manage email and things like that, it's connected to my Squarespace. Squarespace has all of the inner workings to help you get the metadata on your episodes right. When you upload an episode to the internet, wherever you host it, you have to put metadata in and specify certain things about the episode that are required by podcast apps like Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, all those apps. And if you don't get that metadata right on your file, or you miss something, your episode might not get published, might get rejected. So with Squarespace, they lay out all the fields for you where you need to enter information, and that makes it so seamless. That's the thing. It was just such a seamless experience that made it easy for being a beginner. So that's why I love it. Plus, it has really easy drag and drop design tools in the templates that make it easy to have a beautiful website. So I definitely recommend Squarespace. I like it. WordPress is another good host, as long as I don't know everything about WordPress, so I don't want to tell you the wrong thing, but I know that there is a subscription that you can get to WordPress that is not true hosting. And then there is one that is true hosting, but WordPress does require a little bit more web design knowledge, I think, but it is very easy to pick up. I have used WordPress before and I liked it back in the day, but Squarespace just made it so easy for a podcast that I liked that. Right now, you can post up to 300 episodes for a podcast on Squarespace, and then they start archiving. So what that means is that your episodes will if you go above 300 episodes, then you only the most recent 300 will be the ones that are shown in the podcast apps. But at that point, your listeners just want the latest episodes anyways, and they're probably not going to go all the way back to your first season unless they're avid fans, in which case they'll go to your website where you have your stuff archived, which is perfect. You want that traffic. So I hope that doesn't make it sound complicated, because really this is like such a low barrier to entry. I feel like it doesn't cost very much. A business subscription to Squarespace is like $200 a year. GarageBand's free. Skype was only like $2.99 a month, and that was if I wanted to call someone on a cell phone as opposed to just over the computer. It's free if you don't want to. Skype is not updating anymore, so I would say use Zoom. And you can get Zoom for free too. So low barrier to entry. But let me tell you my current software list now. We do spend some money on software. It's one of the best of investments, I think, once you start getting going and you have enough content and you're getting traction. So we still use Squarespace, which we've built out quite a bit, and we'll see how that goes. I use GoDaddy. That's where I get my URLs from. You can use Squarespace to buy URLs too, but I've just always used GoDaddy. So that's on my list. Like I said, I started with Skype. I moved to Zoom. I use ShortPixel. ShortPixel is an app. It integrates with WordPress, but you can use it in a browser for Squarespace, and it compresses your images. You always want to compress your images that you put on your website so that it runs as fast as possible. ShortPixel is an app that allows you to upload your images and compress them, but it's got different options for how you compress them. So if you don't want to sacrifice quality in your image for size, there's an option for that. And several different options to choose from like that. I've always wanted a magazine quality website. I used to have a dream to own a magazine. And now that we're in the internet age, it just turns out that more, a website has with the blog and the podcast has turned into what it is actually. But I just love it. The episode that we put out, I was looking at the layout and I'm like, man, if you look at our layout from when we first started, which is still on the website, by the way, if you go to season 1, you can see the difference between how we were doing things graphically to how we're doing things now up to episode 86. And it's just night and day how much better it is. So ShortPixel is part of that process. We now use a website called Ahrefs, which monitors our SEO health, and it audits our website for health once a week so that we know if there are any broken links in the website. We know if any of our keywords are trending and bringing traffic in. And to grow your audience, that's really important. Your search engine optimization and your website health. So that's not something that you necessarily have to focus on immediately, but you do want to focus on that eventually if you keep growing your show. So that's why we didn't start out with that, but and it took us a while. It's taken a good, we're going into year 4 of audience growing, and I'm in it for the long haul. So SEO, Google Drive to store files, G Suite. Obviously, we still use G Suite for email. It is good to, even though you can use Google, it's worth it to have an email address, which you can also get through GoDaddy or Squarespace. It's good to pay for an email address that has your URL as the end of it. It's more professional. People seem to find it more credible if you're running a business or a show or something like that. Adobe Creative Cloud, I do all our graphics in there, but we also use Canva to do social media graphics because it's more efficient for certain types of graphics. I still use GarageBand. My husband uses Reaper. I use Trello for project management. I use an app called Headliner to create waveform videos, to create sound bites and long episode videos for YouTube, to build out YouTube. This all helps grow traffic. Videos get a lot of traffic. I use a website called SmarterQ to queue my social media posts, so that saves me a lot of time, and I don't have to post manually to all the places, and I'm able to post to more places to also grow traffic. I use Tailwind for the same thing, only Tailwind for Pinterest and SmarterQ for LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. I was telling you about the online course earlier. I built that out in a software called Teachable. We launched merch, so we have hookups to Stripe and Square. So you need to be able to collect payments if you're going to sell anything on your podcast site. So Stripe is for online payments and transactions, which I like way better than PayPal, but that's available too if you want to integrate that into a site. And then Square is for if you're going to do in-person events with physical products, which merch is one way to monetize your podcast. It's probably not the best way. We won't talk about monetization tonight, but Square for merch and physical products. And if you set your podcast up like a business, you'll need QuickBooks, or something to manage your books and do your accounting. I use MailChimp to send out a weekly newsletter, because if you have a podcast, you want to build your email list, because email lists include very engaged listeners, and you can send them out whatever episode that you put out that week. You can solicit guests that way. You can sell stuff that way. It's very important. MailChimp has a free version that you can start with, which we're still on. And then once you get a certain amount of people on your list, you can bump up to the next level. There are other email providers out there that might be better than MailChimp. I've heard a lot of good things about Flowdesk and a ton of good things about ConvertKit. I tried ConvertKit for a little while and thought it wasn't worth it to switch over from MailChimp, but those are 3 options you can look into. I mentioned PodTrack earlier for analytics and making your decision, but you also want to sign up for PodTrack when you have a podcast, because they give you a URL that you put into your podcast episode that will track downloads and listens and gives you insight into how your episodes are doing. And that's very important if you want to grow and monetize your podcast later. You need to be able to tell people what type of people are listening, how many people are listening and downloading, what episodes are doing the best, and things like that. And that will attract sponsors. So if you start that from the get-go, which we didn't do that until we were like 2 years into the process. If you start that from the get-go, I think you can monetize faster. So that's important. Okay, so that was a huge list of software. There's a difference between what you need to start out with and what you can grow into. I gave you an idea of both of those things. I'm going to drop this list, this software list and equipment list, in the Backstage Pass library. And what we didn't get to today that I thought we would get to is, should I set my podcast up as a business, and what business services do you use? So I will get to that in the next call. If you guys are interested in it, maybe I can get those things posted in the Backstage Pass too. Gosh, I'm just so grateful that I got to talk to Jason and see his face. And it's always so great to catch up with you guys. And but it is time to wrap up, and I had a lot of fun going over all this stuff with you. I know it's like the nitty-gritty details that aren't always as fun, but that's okay. We'll get into some more fun stuff in another call too. There is a lot more to podcasting than just the software and the equipment and things like that, but logistics. Remember, if you're watching the replay and have questions, feel free to post them in the comments for this video in the Human Amplified Patreon feed, so I can clarify anything and support you in the way you need support. If you haven't already, subscribe to the Human Amplified podcast on your favorite podcast app. Subscribe to my weekly newsletter at humanamplified.com, and you'll see that I do that in MailChimp. And just thank you so much for supporting Human Amplified on Patreon. And I will see you next month. Okay. Yay. Bye.